مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. ربما تبدو السياسة الأمريكية بسيطة جدا، ففي النهاية مقارنة بمعظم الدول الديمقراطية حيث توجد طائفة واسعة من الأحزاب السياسية. في الولايات المتحدة لدينا حزبان فقط، ولكن حزبين ليست حركتين إيديولوجيتين ضيقتين تدرانه بسهولة الأعضاء الذين لا يدعمون أفكار القيادات. لو كان الحال كذلك لكان من الصعب بناء أغلبية، وهي ما يحتاجه كل حزب للفوز في نظام مكون من حزبين. بدلا من ذلك نسمي حزبين خيمتين كبيرتين تضمان أعضاء تمدد آرائهم إلى حافة الخريطة السياسية. ماذا يحدث في نظامنا السياسي حين يتجاوز الساسة الحد، حين يقولون أشياء يتعذر على الحزب قبولها؟ ماذا يحدث إذا كان أحد الديمقراطيين يساري بدرجة أكبر من اللازم حتى بالنسبة للحزب الديمقراطي، أو إذا كان أحد الجمهوريين يميني بدرجة أكبر من اللازم حتى بالنسبة للحزب الجمهوري؟ كيف يضبط الحزبان أداء الأعضاء الذين يخالفون القواعد، والذين يعصون القيادات، والذين يقولون أشياء يعدها معظم الناس عنصرية أو معدية السامية؟ في هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن سننظر إلى كيف يحاول حزبان السياسيان السيطرة على أعدائهما من أولئك الذين يختلفون في الرأي مع القيادات إلا أولئك الذين يخرجون الحزب. هل يعمل النظام؟ إذا كان به خلل فكيف ينبغي إصلاحه؟ ضيفانا هما الصحفيان السياسيان المتميزان نورمان أورنستين وديفيد هوكينغز. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. Political parties in America are unwieldy things. They range across the political spectrum. They include people in each party that don't agree with the leaders. And the question that we're looking at today is, how do political parties actually enforce decorum? How do they enforce unity? How do they enforce one voice of the leader? Or is it really come as you are? Say what you want, do what you want, be what you want. Today, we're going to look at the two political parties, Democrats and Republicans, and take a close look at their relations with three different women, all of whom have risen to get headlines in recent weeks for some provocative things they've been saying. I'm delighted to welcome Norm Ornstein, David Hawkins. Hello, gentlemen. Nice to have you back.
Good to be with you, Rob.
Let's take a look first at a woman named Liz Cheney. Who is she and why does she matter? David Hawkins, let's start with you.
Boy, I get the easy one. So Liz Cheney is the singular representative, member of Congress, member of the House of Representatives from Wyoming. That word, the name Cheney may be familiar to many in the audience. Her father, Dick Cheney, was the Vice President of the United States for 8 years under George W. Bush, and until very recently, Liz Cheney was what's called the chairperson of the House Republican Conference, essentially the number 3 leadership among the House Republicans, and she was unceremoniously kicked out of that job in recent days for the singular offense of telling the truth, of refusing to spread the big lie that Donald Trump did not win the election. And she now emerges, having been excised from this leadership role, as I would say the most prominent leader of the wing of the Republican Party, which I guess you would call the never Trump wing of the Republican Party.
I mean, Norm, Liz Cheney is a conservative's conservative. How did she become the poster child for the anti-Trump Republicans?
If anything, Liz Cheney is more conservative than her father and mother. On almost every set of issues, she is at the right end of the spectrum in American politics. But she drew a line when it came to Donald Trump's declaration that he won an election which he did not win, and even more, she was appalled at the insurrection that took place on January 6th, where hundreds of people, if not thousands, stormed the U.S. Capitol while Congress was there, endangering many, and with some people who died, and a belief that Trump had incited it. And by saying that publicly over and over, and by voting in the House, one of 10 Republicans who voted for an article of impeachment against Trump for this, she was basically declared persona non grata by her party leader, Kevin McCarthy, and now is wandering in the wilderness, in a sense, of the party. Now, I will say that McCarthy and others said it didn't have to do with what she said per se. It was the fact that she was in the party leadership. But the reality that being in the party leadership and not condemning a president who incited a violent attack on the Capitol tells you something about where the party has gone.
I mean, just to be precise, didn't she get reelected to the party leadership after January 6th? Wasn't she reaffirmed in this position
before?
She was reaffirmed in her position before, and there was a brief effort to oust her from the leadership after she was one of the 10 who voted for impeachment.
That's what I meant.
That fizzled. I mean, essentially at that point, McCarthy, the leader of the Republicans, did not put his finger on the scales, did not try and push her out, and so she survived for a few more weeks until her declarations that that she wouldn't go along with what is known now colloquially around American politics as the big lie.
Yeah, Rob, let me just add something that I think is kind of interesting here. We know from reports by other members of Congress that on January 6th, as this mob was approaching the House chamber, Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader, called Donald Trump and begged for help. Send in troops, send in others to help us with this. And Trump refused. First, Trump said that this was actually an attack by leftists, Antifa, as he said. And when McCarthy said, no, it's your supporters, Trump said, well, I guess they care more about the election than you do, Kevin. And he responded with a number of expletives. But 2 weeks later, Kevin McCarthy went down to Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump was, and basically kissed the ring of the party leader. And right now, what we've seen is that it's become the party of Trump. And if anybody, especially in a leadership position, but anywhere else, declares that they're not a part of the party of Trump, then they're pretty much drummed out of a position of influence.
So what does the Liz Cheney episode say more broadly about where the Republican Party, at least the congressional caucus of the Republican Party, is heading? And how will that party approach the next election? Will it approach the next election on the basis of the last election having still being considered fraudulent?
Well, I think what it says is that the Republican Party is a cult of personality like no American political party has ever been. It is a party that has much less ideology than it has fealty to the former president, and that's I will be the first to plead guilty that I thought we wouldn't be saying that halfway through the new year, 6 months after the inauguration, but we are. He continues to have this hold on the party. Maybe it's because he is a very useful engine for the Republican base in terms of not just ginning up, getting the base vote, the Republican base vote excited, but their money. But it seems for now as though they are going to ride the cult of Trump into the midterm election and assume that they have so many other built-in advantages going into the midterm election that this can carry them through.
So
Just one other interesting element that surrounds this. We had a bipartisan agreement in the House to create a commission that would investigate what happened on January 6th. And the Republicans in the House, 35 of them voted for this. Now that's, a small share of the entire party. It's being blocked in the Senate. What I found so interesting, though, is that we know that on January 6th, Vice President Mike Pence was there in the Capitol, and you had some of this crowd come in with a noose and set up a gallows outside aiming at Mike Pence, and the Secret Service barely got him out. His brother holds the House seat that Pence held many years ago, and his brother voted against the creation of this commission. So what we see with the Republican Party is they don't want to focus on what happened on January 6th, on the attack on the Capitol itself or on the system of governance. And it's, I think, expands what David said. It's a cult of personality to a significant degree, but it's also a party that wants to do anything it can to win back Congress in 2022 and to use that to distort the results of the election in 2024. This is a very, very tenuous time, given where the Republican Party seems to be.
All right, let me ask you about a different Republican woman congressperson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Who is she, and why does she matter, if she matters at all? Norm, I'll start with you, and then we'll go back to David.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene has long been somebody at the radical fringe of American society and American politics, a believer in and a megaphone for conspiracy theories, for what we know as QAnon. When she ran for a seat in Congress, many key Republicans opposed her. They did not want to see her win, but she won. She has been lauded by Donald Trump, who has repeatedly called her one of his favorite people, and she is an incendiary figure. Among other things, she has stalked after perhaps the most prominent member of the progressive left of the Democratic Party, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Even before she came to Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene went to Ocasio-Cortez's office, pounded on the door, and screamed through her mail slot that she was coming after her. And now, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene has become more prominent because she has basically likened the wearing of masks to the Holocaust. That for people who are required to get vaccinated or to wear masks, it's like wearing gold stars and being hauled off in trains to concentration camps. And it took 5 days after she made these very incendiary comments for Kevin McCarthy to say it was appalling. But now we're seeing at least some Republicans try and get distance from her. But after drumming Liz Cheney out of the leadership, they have taken no action against Marjorie Taylor Greene, who continues to double down on her statements.
So, David, behind closed doors, I mean, serious people must see the contrast behind how the party is dealing with Liz Cheney and Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, I mean, there are adults here. What is going on inside, the serious conference rooms and offices of Republican Party leaders?
Well, I think they are adults, and I think they're political pros, obviously, and most of them have much more professional exposure to politics and the way politics works than Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think that this is a force that they don't feel they can control. This is a force that they feel like they cannot. Just as Donald Trump was a force they could not corral, she seems to have a similar hold on things. And this may be crass to say, but she's raising a hell of a lot of money for the party. I talked about Donald Trump being a useful engine going into 2022. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the more people in the media, quote unquote, pick on her, the more her colleagues, quote unquote, pick on her, the more money she raises. And many of those people are opening their checkbooks not only for her, but for other Republicans.
I don't mind saying it. She's wacky, and serious people are not actually laying down the line on this. Norm?
Look, let's keep in mind that We are now many months after the inauguration of Joe Biden, and almost 3/4 of Republicans in the country still believe that Donald Trump won the election. We have a substantial group of people who will listen to Donald Trump, and if Donald Trump says that Marjorie Taylor Greene is somebody he loves, they're going to respond to that. But at the same time, the money that's being raised isn't just because of what Trump says. It's because way too large a proportion of people who identify as Republicans in the country believe this wacky stuff. Now, I think there's another really important point to make here, which is our political system has become tribal in nature. And if it's tribal, which means you believe that people on the other side are evil and want to destroy your way of life, then anybody that they attack becomes your ally and friend. And so some of the support and money going to Marjorie Taylor Greene is because Democrats have attacked her appropriately, but that makes her an ally to some who might not necessarily believe these wacky things.
All right, well, when we come back after the break, we're going to take a look at, shall we say, the extremes on the other side. Republicans alone do not have a monopoly on extreme statements by members of their party. And we're going to take a look at how Democrats enforce discipline, such as it is, among some of their more obstreperous members, and try to draw some lessons from all this for the state of American politics. In just a moment. As I said in my essay today, Congresspeople, men and women, often say outrageous things. But despite rules that govern proper decorum, they are rarely censured for it by the House of Representatives. In all of American history, only 5 Congresspeople have ever been expelled from the House, 3 in 1861 for supporting the Southern Rebellion against the United States, and 2 later on who were convicted of bribery. But 23 Congresspeople have been censured over the decades, 11 for saying things too outrageous for the times, and 2 for using violence on the floor of the House. The first ever to be censured was a controversial congressman from Ohio named William Stanbury, censured for insulting the Speaker of the House in 1832. The most recent was in 1921, when Congress censured Texas Representative Thomas Blanton for inserting into the congressional record a letter laced with foul language and insults. And a sign of things to come, Blanton's constituents didn't care very much. They re-elected him to Congress 3 more times. All right, as I said just before the break, Democrats are not without their own. Let's start with someone from your state of Minnesota, Ilhan Omar. Norm, it's one thing to support Palestinian rights, and that's a much more broadly supported view in the Democratic Party today. But it's something else to call Israel a terrorist state, words that could not but feed a spate of violent anti-Semitic actions in recent days. Is this okay in today's Democratic Party, Norm?
Many Democrats, including many in Congress, have been very uncomfortable with the statements, not just by Omar, but by some of her colleagues as well on the progressive side. And we saw, just as one example, a Democrat from the district that I hail from, Dean Phillips, who issued a very strong statement, along with some others, and these are progressive members as well, of condemnation of those who call Israel a terrorist state or even an apartheid state, and who are not coming out strongly against what's been a spate of some violent attacks, anti-Semitic attacks here in the United States. Of course, with what's been happening in the Middle East, it's an incendiary time as well. We're not seeing the party leaders step up and get involved in this internecine dispute that's going on. They're leaving it to the other members. But clearly, this is bringing some serious tensions within the Democratic Party.
Do you see, David, any move for the party leadership to enforce some discipline on these things?
I don't think in a sort of tangible way. I don't think they're going to take her off any committees or rebuke her in any public way. I think they have probably counseled her.
Thank you for laying it out for our viewers. Norm Ornstein, David Hawkins, a little bit depressing, but I think that's the state of America's tribal politics in 2021.
Sadly so.
Thank you for being with us on Dakhel, Washington. A nation's greatness, said Mahatma Gandhi, is measured by how it treats its weakest members. When it comes to political parties, one can say that a party's greatness is measured by how it polices its most outrageous members. Now, politicians often say and do things out of the ordinary. Sometimes this is to differentiate themselves from the crowd, so they stand out. Think of the politician who kisses a blue ribbon cow at a state fair somewhere in rural America. Sometimes this is to draw attention to a cause, a goal, a principle. Think of Congressman John Lewis, one of the great civil rights leaders of our era, who coined the phrase good trouble to describe positive law-breaking, such as marching peacefully across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the face of menacing police with even more menacing attack dogs. Sometimes politicians say and do things out of the ordinary that attracts the denunciation of their colleagues. Take the remarkable story of Liz Cheney, daughter of the former vice president, herself one of the most conservative members of the conservative Republican caucus in the House of Representatives. But to Cheney, being an ideological conservative from Wyoming doesn't extend to blindlessly endorsing the fraud alleged by former President Trump, that his election was stolen and that Joe Biden's victory is illegitimate. Because she has the temerity not to support that flat earth theory so many Republican office holders still cling to, she was voted out of her position in the party leadership. What an amazing turn of events for the party of Lincoln, Eisenhower, and Reagan. And then sometimes politicians say and do things that ought to attract the denunciation of their colleagues, but don't. This happens on both the right and the left, perhaps not in equal measure, but it's certainly there. On the right, there is deafening silence from fellow Republicans around the wacky, outrageous statements of a Georgia congresswoman named Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose latest remark is that requiring members of the House to wear a mask in public places is akin to the Nazis leading Jews to the gas chambers during the Holocaust. On the left, there's the only slightly more noise from fellow Democrats when progressive congresspeople like Ilhan Omar of Minnesota accused Israel of terrorism, which cannot have but fueled a terrible spike in violent anti-Semitic attacks on Jews across the country. Now, we know from history that words have consequences. Yes, they aren't sticks and stones, but words can do more than hurt. They can unleash the worst inside us, as our nation saw with the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. We count on our elected representatives to know this. When they don't, their party should step in. It's time they do their job. Bahava nasalu nehayat hadha hilhalka min barnamij Dakhel, Washington. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول قبضة دونالد ترامب المحكمة على الحزب الجمهوري، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل وإلى أن ألقاكم. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.